Hi, I'm Skylar Leininger, and I was the club president during the years of 1975, 1976. Great years.
All right. Sky, tell us about the times that were going on in our city, our country, the club, kind of a time capsule that year that you were president. What was going on?
Well, it was the winding down of the Vietnam War as far as the country was concerned. And in the city and the county itself, it was a no-growth movement that was on at that particular time. So it was very interesting and politically as far as the city and the county were concerned.
All right. As you took over as club president, did you have any goals or things you wanted to accomplish during your year?
Well, I think that the main goal was to carry on the principles of Rotary, the mission of Rotary, and to do service above self, which is basically what we are. We're a service organization. So that was the thing to carry forth, and which had been the history of our club since 1921.
That's right. Were there any issues or hurdles that you faced during your year? Were there events that came up that were challenging for you and your board of directors?
Well, not particularly. I had a great board of directors. And Ray Taluzzi was my vice president, and Larry Adamson was the secretary. Bill Wood was the sergeant of arms. Bill Gilkinson was the immediate past president. Bob Shelton and Max Hahn were on the board of directors. And of course, Helen was there to guide us. Helen Middleton was there to guide us through all of our problems and travails, which we really didn't have many. It was really fun going back over the books, the bulletins that we had. It was like going over and seeing old friends again and reminiscing. It really was a lot of fun to go past the book. As you know, that the bulletins are collected at the end of every year and put into a book form, so that the president has a chance to look back and see what's going on. But I had a wonderful board, and they were all very participating. They handled the programs. They got very good programs. Warren Grisetta was on the board, and he brought in some excellent programs from his naval experiences and so forth. But it was fun putting programs together. Several things had happened during my term that I thought were interesting. One thing, there were only 5 clubs outside of ours in town, period. And incidentally, when I joined Rotary, Rotary was the only club in town. That was in May, a long time ago. That was May 1st of 1947 that I joined Rotary, our Rotary Club here. But it was the only club in town. At that particular time, if I may go back a little bit, there was only we used to have the president of the high schools come and attend the meetings, which was a very interesting and innovative type of thing to do. But it was fun to do that. When I was president, I got the other presidents, the other 5 presidents together, and we would have a monthly past presidents meeting, or not past presidents, but presidents meeting of the clubs that were available in town at that time. And we talked about whether, how much we were charging for meals and whether somebody was too high or too low, so that actually when somebody visited a club, they would know that there was going to be a fairly standard price for the club as against going up and down the scale all the time. And we'd talk about meetings, and of course there was always the perennial thing of attendance and rabbits, people that would cut out of meetings early on us and so forth. As a matter of fact, one of the things that we had, which was interesting, shows you the changing times. If you were late for a meeting, there was a basket by the door, and if you were late for the meeting, it was hoped that you'd put in 10 cents. And if you left early, there was a basket there, and hopefully you'd leave 25 cents. So that was an interesting thing, and shows a little bit about the times that were going on at that particular area. Another thing we did when we had the past presidents of the other clubs together, we got together and I suggested that they make a donation to the Reed Park Zoo. and they were needed some funds and so forth. So we all got together and had our clubs pool in some money. And I think there's a plaque still over at Reed Park there in the Reed Park Zoo area that says that the following clubs made a donation and supported the city of Tucson's Reed Park Zoo. So that was kind of fun to get that together and have those people working.
Sky, what were some of the best things about your year that you remember the most? What are the things stand out in your memory?
Well, we really had a great year, but I'm sure all past presidents say the same thing. But we really did. We had a lot of fun. I was very fortunate to follow Bill Gilkinson, who was, when he was president, he was really a stand-up comic. He was very, very funny. And we've had some past presidents, as you know, that have been very, very entertaining. I mean, that was a tough act to follow, but that was a fun time. We did a lot of things. The Community Development Committee that we had was very, very active. We had 2 golf tournaments. We had 1 golf tournament at Skyline Country Club. That was in April, I guess we had. I'm not sure when it was, the date, but it was very interesting. We went up to Skyline Country Club. It was for the Rotary Club of Tucson members. We went up there and we had lunch, and we had greens fees, and we had prizes and so forth, and the total cost of that was $10. That included lunch and greens fees and the whole 9 yards. It was really very funny. And a little later on in the year, we had another golf outing, and we did this one at Tucson Country Club. So those are the type of outings that we had. We also had some of the interesting things that happened. We got involved with the Salvation Army, and that may be one of the first times that we'd gotten in the bell ringing at Christmas time. And so we were at 2 locations. We had 8 locations. We had 4 at the El Con and 4 at the Park Place Mall out on Wilmot and Broadway. So we were involved in that. And the rodeo came around. We had a float. Our club put a float in the rodeo parade.
Wow.
And also during February of that year, we had a Las Vegas night at the Arizona Inn, and that was kind of fun. Again, the community service committee was very, very active, and they had a thing out on a cookout, a steak cookout dinner in the west part of town over around the Tucson Mountains area there. And we went out there to show our support of the Boy Scouts, which we had a troop that we had adopted. And the cost of that was really, really high. They charged us $2.50 for our steak dinner. So we had a lot of fun with that. So that there were a lot of things that were going on in our club. And as I say, that the community service committee that we had, and that was just one of the 24 committees that our club operated on. The community service committee per se was very, very active and did a lot of activities that involved the whole club. We also had Rotary Ann days. Now, Rotary Anns were the wives of the Rotarians. This is before women were in Rotary clubs. We're talking about the mid-70s now, so this is before that, before women. So they were called Rotary Anns and the Rotary Ann days, and when we had a particularly good program that we thought would appeal to the ladies, they were invited, and it was called a Rotary Ann Day. So we had 2 or 3 of those during the year.
Great. What's the same? What's different?
I think that things that have remained the same is the dedication of the people that join Rotary. And join Rotary not to improve their business per se, but to give back to the community. Almost everybody in this community is involved one way or the other, and Rotarians are particularly involved in things. After all, we're a service club. And by doing that, I think that the involvement, the entire club per se, is very involved in a lot of activities that are outside of Rotary that espouse the principles of Rotary, which are service above self. And I think that that is probably the thing that has changed. I mean, is the same. As far as the changes are concerned, the classifications have opened up. And we used to have the heads of the banks, the head of the departments at the universities, the head of the whatever organizations was in town. Incidentally, if I may, years ago when I first came into the club, and I was on the board of directors in, 1951, I think. At that time, there was only one person per classification, which is very, very interesting. And that's one of the major changes that has occurred. There was one doctor. There were no specialties per se of doctors, such as a urologist or an eye doctor or a general practitioner and so forth. They just had one doctor that was in the club, and that was Meade Klein. And the same thing happened as far as insurance salesmen were concerned. They had one hotel person in the club. They had one auto dealer in the club. That was Frank Riley, and he was. Any other dealers in town didn't have any. Weren't able to come into the club because of the single classification. That changed when I was on the board, and I think Bruce Knapp was the president at that time. We changed that, and one of the people that changed that was very interesting, was Ed Galloway. Ed had come to town and bought the Jeep franchise in town. And so we put Ed up for membership, and of course there was a car dealer at that time. That was Frank O'Reilly. So we had this one car dealer. And but we put Ed up, and Ed's classification, we put him in kind of the back door. His classification was trucks, so that we did that. And Bill Schultz came in. Meade Klein put Bill Schultz in, who was a urologist, and Lee, his son, is a member of our club right now. But all of a sudden we broke that open, so that was what opened up. We had eye doctors, and we had all kinds of categories that opened up. I came into the club as a resort hotel operator. The hotel guy in town was Jack Proctor, who ran the Pioneer Hotel at that time. But anyway, that was a big change as far as the classifications opening up. Now you've got real estate agents that have the various categories that are commercial, et cetera type. So it's changed a great deal at that time.
Was there anything, Sky, that surprised you as you executed your term as president? Was there something that surprised you?
I would think the surprise probably was the outpouring of support that the president has. It is really gratifying to have that many people that are willing. You ask somebody to do something and they say, "Sure, how can I help?" Or "What do you want me to do?" I think that was probably I didn't expect that. One of the things that was truly a gem was having Helen Middleton as our secretary, because she was the glue that held everything together. And I think that everybody that came into the club, at least when I was president, and then probably before and after me for a long time until Helen retired, would always ask, Helen, will you be sure to be there when I'm president? And if she said yes, then that was this clincher about saying, yeah, you bet. And I'll be glad to accept the nomination. Also, that particular time, one of the things that changed is the election of officers and election of people on the board of directors. They used to be elected per se, which they are now, but the president and everything else was, with the board particularly, there were 10 people that were nominated for a 1-year term. And then the second year, so 10 people were nominated, and 4 were elected by the club as a whole. 4 people were elected out of those 10, and they went in as the new directors. And then out of the 4 that were elected that year, then they ran the next year. They ran the next year, and the next year, 2 out of that were elected. So they were there for the second year. So you had 4 the first year and 2 the second year, which made up your board of directors. But that has completely changed as far as the elections are concerned. Another thing that happened during my term, which I'm very proud of, was the start of the Rotary Club Foundation, Rotary Club of Tucson Foundation. And that was started, and it was ramrodded by Larry Adamson. And the goal of that was to obviously raise money for scholarships and other worthwhile things. But that was the thing that I was very, very proud that we got that thing going, and which is still going today and is a potent force as far as support for the various activities that our club does.
And the endowment is well over $1 million now, and it started in your year. That's great.
Yeah. Well, you know, I was president a long time ago.
Compound interest. It works, doesn't it? Sky, what advice would you give to a club member, a new Rotarian who joined our club, who thought that he or she might want to be a leader someday, a director or even club president? Do you have any advice for a new Rotarian in our club?
I think new Rotarians, when they come into the club, I think when they have the interview coming in and so forth, one of the things that should be impressed upon them that there's an attendance requirement. And the attendance requirement is very important. A lot of clubs don't have an attendance requirement, and I think the attendance is the backbone of keeping a club together. And by having the attendance, people hopefully will sit at different tables and meet different Rotarians all the time, and so they'll understand the vast array of talent that is available within our own club. But I think that's very important. I think the other thing to do is to get involved in the various committees. In fact, I think everybody should be involved. We're not looking for somebody just going to attend a meeting and eat and lunch and run and so forth. We're looking for people that are going to serve and be on the various committees and make their contribution to the community through the various types of communities or various types of committees that we have available within our organization. Well, one of the things we did, we had the birthday table, or birthday people that came up. I always ahead of time, which was kind of interesting if you let me reminisce. One of the things we did during the birthday is that I would call the birthday people ahead of time, and I would find out some tidbit about them. We'd call them up to honor them and so forth. We'd give a little background of the thing by, how did you get your nickname? Well, some of them didn't want to tell me how they got their nickname, but nevertheless, and we'd kind of skip over that. But I would have that, but I would call them ahead of time. Also, I would call them ahead of time if we were going to do some fining, and believe it or not, if the fine was over $10, I would call them and say, okay, is this going to be off? And again, we're talking over 35 years ago, so the prices scales have changed a little bit. I also tried when I was president to, if I possibly could, to find everybody in the club, not just pick on one person that could afford to do this and that and give money to the club. But I tried to go through the entire, and we had like 250 members in our club. And during my term of office, that 250 was a pretty consistent number of members that we had. We lose about 10% a year and we gain about 10%. So we were in the range of about 250 every time. So that was kind of a challenge to go around and be able to find somebody, whether it was, and at those times the fines were 25 cents, 50 cents, $1 or something like that. But you got everybody, so everybody was involved, and it wasn't like somebody had been spotlighted to pay a particular fine. So I did that. The other thing I did, and I was proud of, is that I ran the meetings on time. And I did that, and I think everybody that has done any speaking or run a meeting knows that I would back off, and so the meetings always started at 1 o'clock, but I would back that off as to the agenda of the items that we had to recognize that Helen put together. And so we'd allocate 2 minutes for this and 5 minutes for this and so forth, and just back that off of 1 o'clock. So sometimes we started at 12:30, and sometimes we started at 25 minutes of 1 or 20 minutes of run, depending on the agendas that we had. But one thing that we did, we ran those meetings on time.
Sky, how did Stubb Ashcraft get his nickname?
Stubb came down from Phoenix, And Stubb was a couple of years ahead of me in school. He was a football player, a neat guy, very dedicated, and if you wanted somebody that was a true blue American, he was born on Flag Day, June 14th. The reason I know that is it's the same day my wife was born. But he wore that flag as a banner over his heart. He really did. And Stubb, when he came down, and I think the name is fairly obvious, Stubby was short. I mean, he was really short. Yeah, he was around 5 feet or 5'2" or something like that. And you know, he's built like kind of like in later life like a spark plug, but that's where he got his name. And I think he got it when he was on when he was playing on the line of the football team. But he was a neat guy. But I can tell you, he was a dedicated Rotarian, and he was a true blue un-American. He was in World War II, as a lot of us were. But the name Stubby came, I believe, when he was on the football field. He also was an Eagle Scout in Phoenix, and so he was very, very active in the Scout movement. One of the terms that we did during my term, we had members of the club every so often stand up before the main speaker and give a vocational talk, so that the club members would understand a little bit more about what this person did. And that went over very well. I was blessed with a great program committee, and again, I think all past presidents say that you don't have the greatest time and so forth, but we really did. We had diversified programs that were fascinating, and everybody contributed. I was very fortunate. I brought because I had known her for a long time. I'd met her in college and so forth, was Margaret Hance when she was president, or she was mayor of Phoenix. And I asked Margaret if she could come on down and so forth and give us a speech, and so down she came and signed up for us. So that was a very interesting. I mean, as a matter of fact, I dated Margaret in college. So and she didn't hold it against me, so she showed up. A person that should really get special recognition was Larry Stern, who ran the bulletins, and he was the editor of the bulletins and so forth. The bulletins we had were very, very factual, very good. One of the things that we did was on the bulletins we had the classifications that were open. Every so often we'd put those classifications in, so people that knew somebody that was in that classification that wasn't a member of our club, they could, that was possibly a potential member that we had that we could look at. We also listed all the scholarship monies that collected every time. So, yeah, because we had to get, it cost us, I think, $550 for scholarships. And the scholarships that we had in the scholarship program, at that time we gave a scholarship to a selected high school senior from every one of the high schools in Tucson. And that time there were 10, 12, 13, 14 high schools at that particular time. So we'd give like $550 for a scholarship for the year when they would go to the University of Arizona. So the scholarship, we didn't have a lot of outside fundraising going at the time, so the scholarship cups were the main source of where these monies came from. So that is one of the reasons they were put in the bulletin, is how much money we pulled in and so forth, to inspire, if we can, people to drop a few more bucks into the scholarship cups. When we first started doing the scholarship cups, and this was before me, but the scholarship cup, the money that was dropped in, again because of the signs of the time, and many years ago it was like 25 or 50 cents that you drop into the cup. But the scholarship cups, the funding for the scholarships came out of those scholarship cups that are passed around all the tables. Another thing that happened is we had a special privilege badge, and the special privilege badge was a great big badge. It said special privilege, and it was auctioned off every so often. And whoever bought the badge had kind of free reign for 3 meetings in a row. And they could stand up, they could interrupt they couldn't interrupt the speaker, but they could interrupt the president at any time. They didn't pay any fines for anything they did. they could have the podium for 5 minutes if they wanted to and tell them about what a great business that they had and so forth. But the special privilege badge was a lot of fun, and every so often it was passed around, and it applied only to the person that bought it. They couldn't give it to somebody else and let them use it per se. They had to use it themselves, but it was good for 3 meetings, and it exempted them from fines, and they could interrupt the program and gave them 5 minutes of free time and so forth. And that was really a fun thing to have, because all kinds of people all of a sudden came out of the woodwork and would bid on this thing, and of course the money went into the scholarship fund, which was great. And people would go around and they'd bid on the thing, and they would, all of a sudden somebody would have the special privilege badge and stand up and say, I think you're wrong, Mr. President, and take the podium, and there was no fines.
How much would it go for? How much would it cost a member to buy the
Oh,
badge?
The cost of the thing, it's gonna tax my memory, but I would say that maybe if they got 20, 50, $100,
Wow.
those bucks, I don't think anything went over for maybe 100, but it might have, I don't know. But it was a fun item to have and to utilize. We also had a member at that time, Doug Holdsclaw, who was a very prominent, and became a good friend of Doug. He was a tremendous benefactor to the city as an example, and to the university. He was also had been up in the legislature and was a state senator. He was an interesting person. He came out of Pennsylvania, and he was a doctor as well as a lawyer. And he practiced neither one when he was in Tucson here. He'd made enough money in real estate, so he'd gotten into the real estate. But he would always come up to the presidents, and I say always, most of the time he'd come up to the presidents and slip them a note. And the note would say, well, so-and-so has done such and such, and and that was the indication that, this is a good person to find. And so-and-so would stand up, is it true that this happened? And they'd say, yeah, well, if that's true, you're getting a lot of publicity about this. We think you ought to be fined. How much do you think it's fair to fine you, and so forth, or whatever it is. But anyway, they'd nail him on that. But Doug was very, very interesting as far as going out and tapping people. And he took great delight in it. And he read the newspaper, obviously, every day, and picked out these tidbits of Rotarians that were doing various things, or had been promoted, or on a board of directors, or the Tucson Airport Authority, or whatever it was that they did. So it was a great source of funding and finding as far as the presidents were concerned.